Chapter 2439. You don't respect life, it has nothing to do with others. Lan Yu, if you want to live or die, don't drag others down with you. He paused, my life has nothing to do with you. Besides, I can't accept men and men, do you understand? He looked at Lan Yu as if he was looking at a lowly creature, and Lan Yu's heart was stabbed. Just as they were confronting each other, the door opened and in came Qin Mu. Qin Mu heard from Yi Muyun about Qin Chen and was worried, so she came over. She didn't expect to see such a scene when she opened the door. Lan Yu slept with Qin Chen. Although there was no problem with the gender, did Lan Yu know that he slept with a woman? Or did Qin Chen sleep with Lan Yu? But Qin Chen didn't. He could sleep with Lan Yu. Or did Lan Yu and Qin Chen use some special method? Qin Mu was confused. She held a thermos and stood there in a daze. After a long time, she squeezed out a smile. Chen Chen, Mom asked me to come, but I don't think it's convenient for you right now. I'll leave first, Chong Wang is waiting for me downstairs. After saying that, Qin Mu stepped forward, placed the thermos in Qin Chen's hands, and left in a puff of smoke. Then. In less than half an hour, everyone in the Qin family knew that Qin Chen slept with a man, and that man was his patient, and a man who had just woken up in a vegetative state. Qin Anlin asked worriedly, vegetative state? Is it okay? Meanwhile, in Qin Chen's luxury condominium, Qin Mu had left for a long time, and the sound of the door could be heard. After a long time, Qin Chen said coldly, are you satisfied now? The whole world thinks we slept together. Lan Yu lay there, looking terrible. After a while, he said, because I don't look good enough for you. Because I don't have the same hobby as you. Qin Chen pursed his lips, looking like he couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't chase Lan Yu away. Instead, he called the nurses in the hospital and asked them to clean up the scene. Lan Yu was stunned. Qin Chen, are you crazy? If this was spread out, it would have a great impact on his reputation. After all, Qin Chen was a doctor, and a famous one at that. It would not be good for him to have an affair with his patient. Qin Chen put down the phone and said calmly, Lan Yu, I've decided to go abroad. Lan Yu was stunned. He looked at Qin Chen and said in a hoarse voice, I can go. You can find someone else to send me. No need. Qin Chen said indifferently, stay here for 2 days. If you, like me. It was the first time he said it so frankly and directly. He didn't even tease or ridicule him. It was as if he was willing to help Lan Yu because he was going to leave. Lan Yu suddenly got angry. I didn't say I like you. Then why are you pestering me? Qin Chen's voice was a little hoarse. You will trouble Mr. Lan if you do this. In other words, you are disturbing my life. Lan Yu was stunned. After a long time, he said in a low voice, I didn't expect it would be like this. Don't go. If anything happens, I will clarify it. There is nothing to clarify. Qin Chen looked at him. It will never be between us. Lan Yu didn't know why his heart was empty. He had been gloomy for 8 years. He had secretly liked Cher. He thought that his feeling for Qin Chen was shameful. But Qin Chen said he was going to leave. He was very sad. Chapter 2440. Lan Yu suddenly felt that he and Qin Chen could have been friends, the kind that ridiculed each other. It was him who ruined all of this. It was his love for Qin Chen that he shouldn't have had, which ruined all of this. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. And Qin Chen, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, said very softly, even if I'm not here, your leg can still be cured. I will communicate with the attending doctor next, you can rest assured. Lan Yu frowned. There's no need to leave. It's not because of you, I already have a plan. Qin Chen's voice did not carry any warmth. You can't affect me. This last sentence, like a slap, ruthlessly slapped on Lan Yu's face, hit painfully. Lan Yu was speechless for a moment. Qin Chen continued to say softly, Lan Yu, don't give up life at any time, because, he slowly turned back and said very softly, if you leave, you can never come back. You can't see someone missing, someone in pain. Lan Yu's throat seemed to be blocked. He intuitively felt that there was a secret in Qin Chen's heart. The secret of feelings. He asked hoarsely, that girl, is she very beautiful? Girl. Qin Chen couldn't help laughing, but he still lowered his head and grunted, very beautiful, very sunny. When he said that, a charming smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and Lan Yu saw that his heart was heavy. Qin Chen deeply loved a girl, a very beautiful girl, and his current appearance. Lan Yu was silent for a moment, and then said, in a while, I will go back to the hospital. Dr. Qin, sorry to disturb you. He thought that he should withdraw from Qin Chen's life, regardless of whether Qin Chen decided to go abroad or not. He also felt that a clean man like Qin Chen was not worthy of him. Whether he was willing or not. Qin Chen looked at him. After a long time, he said indifferently, up to you. Lan Yu said in a low voice, I really do like you a little. This is quite dangerous, Dr. Qin, thank you. Although he always called Qin Chen a black-hearted doctor and a quack, he knew in his heart that Qin Chen's medical skills were excellent. Although his mouth was a little poisonous, he was still very serious when treating patients. I don't know why you're in a bad mood, but in the future, I hope you'll be happy. Lan Yu's eyes fell straight on his face. You're still very young. What do you know? Qin Chen's voice became even colder. Lan Yu, don't use your so-called kindness to persuade others. Some people can be cured physically, but not mentally. He stretched out his hand and placed it on the position of his heart. There's something wrong here. He said it calmly, but Lan Yu could read the disappointment in his tone. Lan Yu wanted to say something, but everything he said was useless. Qin Chen said that his heart was sick, and there was no cure, and Lan Yu was the cause of his pain. Therefore, getting out of his life was the most correct thing to do. Lan Yu left very quickly. In the morning, he moved himself to Chi-Chi's room. Of course, it was the nurse who moved him. When the young nurse came, her heart was trembling. The number 1 Prince Charming of Xingyuan Hospital slept with a male patient. This news, how shocking. One had to know that in the hospital, people who wanted to sleep with Dr. Qin lined up from one end of the hospital to the other, but Lan Yu. Chapter 2441. Lan Yu was good in the past. He was handsome and rich. But now, he was still rich, but his appearance really made people unable to eat him. Could it be that Dr. Qin had done too many experiments and his appetite became a little heavy? However, the nurse did not dare to ask or look too much. She quickly packed up and pushed Lan Yu away. When Lan Yu left, he looked at the man who had been standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. His voice was indifferent. Thank you, Lan Yu. Thank you for saving me last night. Qin Chen slowly turned around and looked at him quietly. Goodbye. Lan Yu knew that this goodbye might mean that they would never meet again. With a background like Qin Chen's, he had the right to be willful. He could leave whenever he wanted. Being a doctor was just a hobby. Lan Yu left and gently closed the door. Qin Chen had been standing there for a long time and did not move. In fact, Lan Yu was wrong. He, Qin Chen, was not cold-hearted. If his heart had not been messed up, he would not have left. And the reason why he left was because he could not accept the fact that he might have fallen in love with a man like Lan Yu. How could he fall in love with someone else? Qin Chen smiled faintly and helplessly. In the elevator, Lan Yu kept his eyes closed. The nurse said carefully, "Actually, Mr. Lan, Mr. Qin has been picky for a long time. It's not embarrassing." In their eyes, Lan Yu had been returned. Dr. Qin probably felt that it was not delicious halfway through the meal. Mr. Lan was so pitiful. He had sent himself here in a daze and was returned. Now, Mr. Lan looked like he was about to cry. Lan Yu raised his eyes and looked at the two nurses coldly. The nurses did not say anything. Not only was Lan Yu a famous painter, but he was also from a wealthy family. They could not afford to offend him. Lan Yu returned to the ward, and soon, a new doctor came in. He was a middle-aged man, and he looked very reliable because he was not wearing clothes that cost hundreds of thousands of yuan, and he did not have the smell of cologne, and his skin was fairer than a woman's. In short, everything made Lan Yu extremely satisfied, except for a faint sense of loss in his heart. Dr. Chen would come over every day to help Qin Chen's leg. Sometimes, when Qin Chen's condition was not good, he would communicate with Qin Chen. About half a month later, Lan Yu could move his legs again. That day, Dr. Chen was very excited and called Qin Chen on the spot. "Little Qin, Lan Yu's legs should be fine. As long as he perseveres, he should be able to walk and jump." Dr. Chen had been a doctor for a long time and had the demeanor of an old doctor. Lan Yu was listening by the side. He was a little far from Dr. Chen, so he could only hear the faint voice on the phone. It was so faint that it did not sound like Qin Chen's voice. At this moment, he wanted to hear what Qin Chen had to say. He wanted to hear Qin Chen personally treat his legs. However, he was not there. He left. Suddenly, Lan Yu felt that Qin Chen was a coward. He was obviously afraid. Dr. Chen was still excited. He listened to the phone and nodded repeatedly. "I understand, little Qin. Your method is very useful. I plan to." Then, he used 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 methods to treat Lan Yu's wounds. Lan Yu listened and gritted his teeth. Qin Chen did not find the wrong person. Dr. Chen was very good, but a little boring. Chapter 2442. Lan Yu waited anxiously at first. Then, he simply lay down and did not think about anything. However, after so long, this was the first time he felt that he was so close to Qin Chen. He had traveled across the ocean, but he still heard his voice. Although it was a little small. After Dr. Chen hung up the phone, he looked at Lan Yu and pushed his glasses up excitedly. Then, he told Lan Yu everything that had been said on the phone in detail. He gave a bunch of professional treatment plans. "I believe you, Dr. Chen. I'll do as you say," Lan Yu said quietly as he lay down. Dr. Chen seemed to have been splashed with cold water. He froze for a moment and coughed lightly. "Lan Yu, I don't mean to say this, but you should be more open-minded. Look at what happened between you and little Qin. The whole hospital knows about it, and little Qin even went abroad. You have to be more open-minded. Dr. Qin is usually very picky, and he was confused for a moment. You have to give him the cold shoulder." Lan Yu's face darkened. "What do you mean by a melon that is forcibly twisted? Does he mean that I forced myself on Qin Chen?" He looked at Dr. Chen and said slowly, "You said that everyone in the hospital knows about me and Qin Chen." Dr. Chen was shocked. Lan Yu had admitted it himself. He did not believe it before, but now, he believed it without a doubt. "Yes, it's a rumor." Dr. Chen immediately packed his things. Now that he had obtained breaking news, he had to immediately share it with his colleagues who were as gossipy as him. Yes, Xingyuan Hospital was the most gossipy about Qin Chen's private affairs, especially when it was Lan Yu who was in a vegetative state. Therefore, during the days when Qin Chen willfully left, Lan Yu had a hard time. He was labeled as a man and a man. No matter how hard he tried, he could not tear it off. Later, he realized that he did not want to tear it off anymore. When Lan Yu was discharged from the hospital, it was already spring. He actually spent more than 100 days in the hospital. When he was discharged, he could already walk with crutches. Lan Jia's parents also came to visit later, but they were still a little shocked, especially when Lan Yu attended Cher's wedding, which made Lan Jia's parents unable to forgive him. But even though they were against it, Lan Yu still went to participate. It was the middle of March, the sky was full of blue, and the branches were quietly sprouting new branches. Everything was fresh and clean. In the church, the bell rang. In the dressing room, Cher looked at the mirror nervously and said to Qin Mu behind her, "Qin Mu, will I faint later?" "I don't think so." Qin Mu smiled and handed the bouquet to her. "Sister-in-law, I'm sure that if you dare to faint, my brother will carry you to complete the ceremony." She blinked. Big brother has been waiting for this day for a long time. He probably can't wait any longer. Cher looked at Qin Mu in the mirror. "Look at you. You have the nerve to say anything now." Qin Mu just smiled and helped her adjust her clothes. Actually, Cher did not want to get married so early. She still wanted to play. But everyone knew that she was afraid of losing face. Because after all, she still married her brother. But she did not expect that in the past few months, her brother would kill someone again, because it was difficult for Shui to get pregnant. Her brother didn't use protection anymore. He even did it on purpose every time. Perhaps this was the evil nature of men. The more impossible it was, the more he would try to make it happen. In the end, she became pregnant. Chapter 24:43. Qin Mu also found it hard to imagine. Did her brother and Cher usually have a heavy taste? Especially now that Cher didn't seem to be afraid of her brother. She dared to behave atrociously in front of her brother. Of course, her brother's body was also often bitten by Cher. But Qin Mu suspected that her brother didn't feel anything at all. Instead, he would be secretly happy. He really had no integrity. Qin Mu complained as she helped Cher to tidy up. She was only 2 months pregnant, and her lower abdomen was still flat. However, Cher's little face was round and looked moist. She had grown back a few years and looked like she was in her early 20s. Qin Mu thought that her brother didn't know how to torture his little wife at night. Thinking of this, Qin Mu's face was a little red. After all, she was still thin-skinned. Cher hugged her and rested her little face on Qin Mu's shoulder. She said softly, "Mumu, just like what you said to me that year, we both want to be happy." Qin Mu pursed her lips and said in a choked voice, "But Cher, I always owe you an apology." The two girls hugged each other, just like when they were in their teens. They were still fine and there was no gap between them. Cher was still smiling. "It's okay, Mumu. Without these 8 years, I don't know how much I love Mu Yun, and I don't know how happy I used to be." She said this, not knowing who was standing at the door. Yi Muyun stood at the door and his handsome face was very gentle. He smiled and said, "Mrs. Yi, if you want to confess, I suggest you do it at our wedding. There will be many people to witness it, and you won't be able to deny it." Shui Er left Qin Mu's shoulder and glared at him. "When did I go back on my word?" He snorted. "Also, don't deny what you promised me tonight." Shui Er's face turned completely red. Yi Muyun. Could he be any more shameless? Qin Mu was still here. Qin Mu, on the other hand, couldn't bear to listen any longer. Brother, could he restrain his endless desires? Was it really okay to show it in front of his sister like this? Mr. Yi expressed that this was nothing. Qin Mu went out first and let them be alone for a while. Yi Muyun looked at his little wife, his expression very gentle. He reached out to help her adjust her veil, cupped her little face and kissed it lightly. You're very beautiful today. Cher hugged his waist and pouted. We can't meet before the wedding. I can't wait. His voice was a little hoarse as he lifted her veil and kissed her on the lips. Weddings are for others to watch. But now, it's a wedding between you and me. Cher was a little helpless. She felt that her Mr. Yi was in the terminal stage of male chauvinism. However, she was still willing to make him happy. She tiptoed and let him kiss her. It was sticky and sweet. After a long time, he finally restrained himself. He pressed his forehead against hers and chuckled. You don't know how nervous I was when Lan Yu came over. I was afraid that he would object to it at the wedding. Cher poked his chest with her little finger and said word by word, Mr. Yi, we've already gotten our marriage certificate. You're showing signs of menopause now. I think I need to reconsider my choice. Yi Muyun chuckled. Lan Yu. Forget it. Chapter 2444. However, Qin Chen didn't care about it and didn't explain it. But Yi Muyun didn't believe it. He knew how persistent his younger brother was. Even if he was a little moved, he would never have anything to do with Lan Yu. As for Lan Yu, he came today probably because of Qin Chen. In fact, Mr. Yi didn't understand why Lan Yu liked Qin Chen. Qin Chen looked like a man. Although he was good-looking, he just looked like a man. How could Lan Yu be turned gay so easily? Yi Zichen felt that there would be a good show to watch at his wedding today. This made him feel a little better. Otherwise, how could it be possible for his wife's ex-husband to attend his wedding and let others gossip about him? On the other hand, he still had some hope for Lan Yu. Maybe he could pull Qin Chen out of the past. Qin Chen seemed to be living a healthy life. But after that night of racing, Yi Muyun knew that everything was just a facade. If he hadn't been detained in time that night, Qin Chen might have been in trouble. Because of his inner demons. Thinking of this, he sighed. Cher didn't know why he was sighing, so she hit him. Are you regretting marrying me? She pouted, I can marry someone else while I'm pregnant. Yi Muyun couldn't help but laugh. Really? Yes. Cher said childishly. Then she hugged him, you wish. I'm relying on you to make money for the Tang family. Then I'll have a lot of children. Yi Muyun's mood instantly became much better. He rubbed his chin and chuckled. It sounds like it's not worth it for me. I have to earn money during the day, and I have to provide my own flesh at night to make Madam happy. Cher's face turned red. His words were getting more and more revealing. Hence, she scolded softly, shameless. His smile was a little unbridled as he moved closer to her little ear and deliberately teased her, Tonight, I'll let you know what shamelessness is. Cher remembered what she had promised before and her face turned red as she stammered, We need prenatal education, it's not good for the child. Prenatal education starts from the 4th month. Mr. Yi smiled slightly. Moreover, isn't it good for the baby to know that his parents love each other? Let the child grow in love. Cher couldn't bear to listen to him anymore. Could he be any more shameless? Thus, he reminded, Let's get married today. He smiled and held her little hand. Now, Mrs. Yi, can you play with me? She was stunned for a moment. Didn't Daddy lead me there? His voice was a little low and hoarse. Cher, I hope that from now on, I'll lead you on every path in our future." He suddenly became serious. She wasn't used to it, but she was a little touched and wanted to cry. Thus, with tears in her eyes, she stood straight and beautiful and handed her little hand to him. "Mr. Yi, you have to think it through. You'll have a hard time in the future." Yi Muyun smiled faintly. "But I will be even happier." He personally put down her veil and tidied it up for her. He was very serious when he did all of this. Cher complained, "You said before that the wedding was for others to see. Look at you now, you're much more serious than before." "That's because I want to give you the most face, idiot." Mr. Yi smiled, but he whispered to his wife. Cher was furious. On the day of their wedding, he actually called her an idiot. Chapter 24:45. The wedding was warm and grand. It was held in an ancient castle-style church. Cher was wearing a Dior custom-made wedding gown. She held Yi Muyun's hand and slowly walked down the red carpet. Their son, little Yi Shu, was wearing a beige checkered suit. She was handsomely holding the hem of her mama's skirt and following behind her like a little attendant. On both sides, there were Cher's relatives and people she cared about, such as Lan Yu. Lan Yu attended the wedding standing. Although standing for a long time made his legs hurt, he still insisted on attending his ex-wife's wedding standing. He thought that he still loved her at this moment. He loved her like a little sister. During the 5 years they had been together, apart from being moved, he had also given her a lot of feelings. This complicated feeling made him give up his sister in the end, the one he had once thought of as his most loved one. Lan Yu's pride made him unwilling to bind her and kidnap her morally. After a catastrophe, she was fine and he returned her to Yi Muyun. He actually felt that it was a very happy thing. As for Lan Ting, perhaps her ending should have been like this a long time ago. All these years, she had lived a life worse than death. Later on, Lan Ting indulged in her private life and was no longer the little girl she used to be. Death might be a kind of release. Lan Yu looked at Cher quietly. Looking at his little girl, his heart was filled with blessings and a trace of bitterness. When Xiao Yishu passed by him, she actually jumped out of the original script and ran over to give him a big hug. She called him Daddy in a clear and melodious voice. Yi Muyun and Cher also stopped for a short while and looked at Lan Yu together. Lan Yu smiled and hugged Yishu. He reached out and handed a box to Cher. "Happy wedding." Cher took it. "Thank you, Lan Yu." Lan Yu suddenly said, "Can I kiss you?" We didn't have a wedding then. Mr. Yi could beat him up at any time. Anyway, Lan Yu was half crippled now. Yi Muyun was rarely generous. He glanced at his little wife and said generously, "Only the forehead or the face." In any case, he had already kissed her first kiss today. Luckily, he was prepared. Lan Yu was surprised, but he still smiled and gently hugged Cher, kissing her forehead. Cher hugged him tightly, her voice a little choked up as she said, "Lan Yu, you have to be well. Otherwise, I can't be happy." He smiled warmly, "You seem to be under a lot of pressure." "I'll do my best." She laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. Fortunately, her veil covered her face, so no one could see it. But Mr. Yi could feel it. He thought to himself that he really wanted to beat Lan Yu into a vegetable again. He wanted to make his little wife cry on his wedding day. However, if he really did beat him up, Cher probably wouldn't let him go. He could only continue with the wedding. Originally, he thought that such a day would be the most emotional for women, and they would cry uncontrollably when they said their vows. But no one expected that the one who cried in the end would be Mr. Yi. Under so many phone cameras, Mr. Ye's crying appearance was captured, but no one dared to spread it. They only dared to pass it around among their family and friends, and then the whole of B City saw it. That handsome and cold man, the head of the #1 financial group in B City, was crying at his own wedding. Chapter 2446. Although he said it was just a formality, he still cried and lost his composure. Cher looked up, gently lifted the veil, and used her little finger to help him wipe the tears from the corner of his eyes. "Brother." Yi Muyun looked at her, his gaze deep, but he gently pulled her into his arms. When he kissed her, his voice was a little fierce. "Don't mention this in the future." "Cher. I didn't want to mention it at first, but brother, you seem to have reminded me." At such a warm and romantic moment, Qin Mo and Qin Chen were playing Easter eggs at the side, adding a little atmosphere to the romantic wedding, and Qin Mo was still clamoring to make a scene in the bridal chamber. And Qin Chen, standing at the side, smiled faintly. Below, Lan Yu looked at Qin Chen almost greedily. He had lost weight, but he was still good-looking. Today, Qin Chen was wearing a light brown woolen suit, very formal, especially at the waist. It reminded Lan Yu of that day when he was naked. Qin Chen's body was the most seductive of all the men he had ever seen, even more so than women. He was an artist, and he had drawn many women with good figures, but none of them was like Qin Chen's waist, which made him feel impulsive. He wanted to feel it personally, but it was just a thought. Qin Chen's attitude was already very clear. In Qin Chen's eyes, he, Lan Yu, was a pervert. He used to like his sister, and now he liked a man. But Lan Yu didn't feel ashamed, because Qin Chen was so beautiful, it wasn't strange for a man to like him. He kept looking at Qin Chen, and finally, Qin Chen noticed him. His gaze was a little indifferent, and there was even a little smile, but Lan Yu couldn't guess what that smile meant. Maybe it was a kind gesture, but it was definitely not a response to his perverted love. Qin Chen just smiled faintly and didn't look at him again, as if nothing had happened. Lan Yu was a little disappointed. He even thought that even if Qin Chen showed disdain for him, as long as his feelings were strong, he would feel comforted. But there was nothing. Qin Chen ignored it. He really didn't care at all. Whether it was good or bad, he didn't care. Lan Yu looked down at his feet. For the past few months, he had been working hard to rehabilitate, not because he wanted to stand up in front of his ex-wife's wedding, but because he wanted to stand up when he saw Qin Chen. He wanted to put on more weight and make himself look more human. Even if he vomited, he still ate with all his might. He was already 60 kilograms now, so he should be able to carry some weight. But in Qin Chen's eyes, there was no difference. This was called not caring. For a moment, Lan Yu was disheartened. He suddenly forgot why he had persevered for the past few months. Was it just for a nonchalant look? His pride made him a little annoyed, and he didn't care so much. Qin Chen's gaze fell on his brother and sister-in-law, but his gaze was empty. He naturally felt Lan Yu's gaze, but what could he respond to? He couldn't. Besides, Lan Yu liked a man, and he was not like that. So be it. This little ambiguity would soon disappear. He heard that Lan Yu's father was sick, and Lan Yu would soon enter the family hotel to work. At that time, there would be a lot of beautiful women. What was a Qin Chen? Chapter 2447. Yi Muyun chuckled and said to his wife, "Didn't I say that Lan Yu was up to no good by insisting on attending?" However, wasn't the speed of her change of heart a little too fast? Previously, she was willing to die for Cher, and now, she was interested in the man of the Qin family. She was really perverted. Cher couldn't say anything and could only smile. Yi Muyun looked at his adorable wife and sighed in his heart. Although this little fool looked stupid most of the time, she didn't drop the ball at crucial moments. When it was time to feign ignorance, she would definitely not be careless. However, on their wedding night, Mr. Yi still managed to get back at her. He did not forget a single thing that she had promised a few days ago. Their wedding night was at the presidential suite of the GM Hotel, which was also the room where they had gotten engaged. He carried her in. The snow-white carpet was scattered with rose petals and the dining table in the living room was lit with silver candles. There was an 8-tiered cake on top with 2 little figures dancing on it. It was a custom-made Swarovski cake made by Yi Muyun and Cher. "It's so beautiful." Cher hooked her arms around his neck and clamored to come down to take a look. However, Mr. Yi patted her gently. "Eat later." He then whispered in her ears, "Brother will bring you to play something more fun." Cher's face flushed red instantly as she looked at him pitifully. "Shameless." He laughed out wantonly and kissed her on the lips. "You forgot what you promised, huh?" Cher leaned on his shoulder and said in a voice that could drip honey, "Brother is not as delicious as the cake." "Is that so?" He chuckled hoarsely. "But brother thinks that you are more delicious than the cake." Cher finally couldn't take it anymore and bit him. Pervert. Even though she was shy, that perverted brother still locked his little wife in the bathroom on their wedding night and did all sorts of shameless things in front of the mirror. She covered her eyes, but he forcefully moved them away, wanting her to see how he treated her. And forced her to do the same shameless things. Fortunately, he was always worried that she was pregnant, so he only dared to play with her for an hour before letting her go. He held her in his arms and took her out to cut the cake in bathrobes. The little fellow sat in his arms and frowned while eating. "I want to brush my teeth again." Mr. Yi pinched her little face and said, "I only served you once and you've already brushed your teeth 4 or 5 times. Am I that dirty?" With that, he was about to kiss her. Shue'er's little hand blocked his kiss, her face full of disdain. "You haven't brushed your teeth." "I don't mind you." President Yi chuckled. "Come here, darling. Give me a kiss." She felt that he was extremely perverted and couldn't help but worry if he would force her to use this method to serve him during the first few months of her pregnancy. Just thinking about it made her blush and her heart race. "Cher, do you know why I like you?" Yi Muyun looked at his little wife and his heart softened. He hugged her as if he was holding a little doll and watched her eat. He said slowly and hoarsely, "Cher, do you know why I like you?" Cher's little mouth was full and she glanced at him. "Because I smell good." Then she leaned over shamelessly. "Does it smell good?" He laughed. So she knew. "You always said that I wouldn't eat you, but now," his voice was low and hoarse. "It seems that you eat me." Cher covered her eyes and screamed. "I regret it. I want to break off the engagement." Chapter 24:48. Cher wrapped her arms around his neck and looked at him like a little girl. That gaze was exactly the same as when they got engaged 8 years ago. That gaze made him want to kill her. However, he was always worried about the child and only dared to kiss her little face carefully. His voice was also extremely hoarse. "Snow, are you happy?" She nodded and leaned into his embrace. Her voice was soft as she said, "I missed you very much during those years." She said it casually, but his eyes became moist once again. She must have suffered a lot outside. But this fool didn't hate him. She loved him. He kissed her, his cheek against hers. At that moment, Mr. Ye's heart was filled with tenderness. Those shameful thoughts from before had long been tossed to the back of his mind. At such a quiet moment, he only wanted to talk to his little wife. He only wanted to hug her, give her comfort, give her love, and give her anything she wanted. He reached out and stroked her long hair gently. Her hair had grown quite a bit. She had wanted to cut it off because she was pregnant, but he didn't allow it. He said that he would take care of it for her in the future. Tell me, how did you spend those few years? He asked in a hoarse voice. Cher shook her head. Brother, no matter how I lived, I don't think you lived a better life than me. She was a girl. She could be willful and do whatever she wanted, but he couldn't. He had to maintain his excellence and wait for her to come back. Just thinking about it made her feel that it had been tough on him. That bit of sadness from earlier was gone. Cher lay on the bed and couldn't stop laughing. Yin Muyun grabbed her long hair and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Cher raised her face and said seriously, "I was thinking that I was the one who earned it." There was a faint smile on his handsome face. He knew what was going on, but he still played along with his little wife. Cher stretched out her hand and counted her fingers. Look at you. You're pretty, you know how to earn money, you know how to coax people, and you know how to take care of children. Her eyes flashed with red hearts. Do you think I've earned it? Especially since he had been in the Tang family since he was young, he was no different from Tang Yu's biological son these years, so there was no need to worry about him plotting for power. When she said this, cold sweat broke out on Mr. Ye's forehead. Of course, he wouldn't tell his little wife that he had enough shares to kick his father-in-law out of Boyi. His little one counted a lot more. In the end, Mr. Yi couldn't help but ask, "Baby, did you miss something?" His little wife looked up at him. Yi Muyun's voice was soft and slow. Don't you think that your husband's ability X is very strong? It doesn't increase in value. Cher rolled her eyes at him. And it seems that the older a man gets, the worse he is. She looked at his expression and felt a little disgusted. Mr. Yi was about to explode. If she wasn't pregnant, he would have spent the whole night letting her know. He was no worse than when he was young. And he was only 28 years old. Not old. He was angry, and Shua was giggling as she buried herself in his arms, feeling incomparably happy. After a while, she looked up again and reached out to hold his face. She coaxed him, "Brother is the best." Mr. Yi was still staring at her. Cher protested, "Married men are the hardest to deal with." Chapter 2449. She had tasted his methods and didn't want to be tortured by him in the bathroom again, so she hugged him, acted coquettishly, and begged for mercy. She knew best what he liked to hear at this time. Just like that, they hugged each other and talked. The night was deep, and the two of them were deeply in love. Such a wedding night was indescribably gentle. It was night. Qin Mu was sitting in the front passenger seat while Zhou Chongguang was driving. On the way home, Qin Mu didn't say anything. When the car stopped, Zhou Chongguang asked his wife gently in a low voice, "Mumu, what's wrong?" Qin Mu was still lost in her own thoughts. She was a little scared by his voice. She looked around and forced a smile. "We're home." She reached out to open the car door, but he stopped her. He stared at her and knew that she was avoiding his question. She hadn't been in a good mood all the way home. He could tell. Qin Mu slowly turned her head and looked at his face. "What's wrong?" "Mumu, I'm asking you." He stroked his chin and smiled. "You're asking me instead." Qin Mu acknowledged, "Oh, nothing much." "Really?" He looked at her and smiled. In the end, he didn't press her. He just pinched her face and said, "Don't hide anything from me. Remember, I'm your husband." Qin Mu looked at him in a daze. Although they had been reconciled for 2 or 3 months, she still couldn't get used to his kiss and their relationship. It was rare for her to look so adorable. Zhou Chongguang unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned over to kiss her lips. This kiss, from a light kiss to a deep kiss, lasted for a full 10 minutes. Qin Mu's toes curled up from his kiss, and her entire body leaned weakly against the backrest. When she woke up, her hands were hugging his shoulders. Her eyes were a little blurred, and she couldn't help calling him, Chongwang. Let's do it in the bedroom, okay? He was still kissing the back of her ear. His voice was low and husky. Let's do it in the car again, huh? Qin Mu did not have the face to do it here. Although it was a closed space, the car would move, and the servants would see it. No matter how open-minded she was, it was impossible for her to do such a thing at home. She reached out and hugged him without making a sound. He understood what she was thinking, so he chuckled. Next time, drive the car into the garage, okay? No. Her voice was like a kitten's. I'm not used to being outside. However, she still looked up at him. Looking at his mature and handsome face, she couldn't help but ask, Zhou Chongwang, have you ever been in a car with another woman before? As soon as she asked, the atmosphere suddenly cooled down. Although his expression wasn't as dark as before, it was still very forceful. He didn't know how to answer her. A smart man would choose to lie at a time like this. Zhou Chongwang was smart and wanted to spend the rest of his life with his wife, so he chose to hide it. He sighed and said very softly, no. Qin Mu was still looking at him. She didn't know why she should believe him if he said he didn't, but when he said so firmly, she knew that there would be. However, if he didn't admit it, it would make her feel better. She hugged his neck and said softly, carry me up. Chapter 2450. However, it was obvious that he wasn't as excited as before. Everything seemed a little slow. His excessive calmness made this matter seem a little deep and bleak. It wasn't that they parted on bad terms, but at least in terms of quality, it was the worst one in recent times. It wasn't just Zhou Chongwang's performance. Qin Mu also couldn't focus on it. After it was over, he lay beside her, his entire body filled with emptiness. It was more uncomfortable to do it than not do it. However, if he didn't do it just now, it would seem that he couldn't explain himself. This matter would be stuck between them. Zhou Chongwang calmed down for a while and turned to look at his little wife. Qin Mu also opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling above, as if she was in a daze. He knew that she wasn't focused at all just now. She didn't even move her eyes. No matter how much he tried to please her, she wouldn't be happy. This was also a kind of frustration for a man. Of course, the disappointment tonight was because of her, but the deeper source was him. If it weren't for his messy past, tonight wouldn't have been like this. He sighed and hugged her. Moo moo, it's my fault. Her body froze. His words were equivalent to admitting it. Although he didn't say it directly. All of a sudden, Qin Mu felt that she was quite knowledgeable. She said to live a good life, but she was still holding on to his past. She used to think that she was a free and easy person, but it turned out that she wasn't. Or perhaps it was because she cared too much. She deliberately softened her body and leaned against him, not wanting this small dispute to turn into a silent, cold violence. He was being nice, and she accepted it. In a marriage, if they fought over these things every day, she didn't think she would have the energy to continue. Finally, she moved her face into his embrace and said in a low voice, I'm not in a good mood today. Zhou Chongwang lowered his head and kissed her forehead. It's okay. Women are always in a bad mood for a few days. Qin Mu frowned and couldn't help saying, Zhou Chongwang, I'm not on my period. It doesn't matter if you're on your period every day. As a husband, you should be tolerant, he said gently. Qin Mu pursed her lips. You're so sweet. You don't like it? He smiled and moved closer to her ear. Shall I take you to the shower? Qin Mu was a person who loved cleanliness very much. She almost couldn't tolerate sleeping without bathing, but what Zhou Chongguang thought was another matter. In the end, as he showered, he pressed her against the bathroom wall and kissed her. The wall was warm from the hot water, so she didn't feel cold even with her back against it. His body in front of her was even hotter. Qin Mu put her hand on his shoulder and accepted his kiss helplessly. Her voice was also intermittent. "Have you done it?" Zhou Chongguang was obviously in a much better mood than before. His voice was warm. "It's not normal for a married couple to do it a few times a night, huh?" She punched him with her little hand and couldn't help but raise her little face. After enduring for a long time, she finally spat out softly, "But, didn't you not want to?" "Who said so?" He kissed the corner of her mouth and murmured, "You didn't feel it, huh?" After that, she couldn't speak anymore. She could only follow him, again and again. He hugged her twice before letting her go. Qin Mu was already so full that she couldn't be anymore. She was washed and put under the blanket, while Zhou Chongguang was still in the bathroom. Qin Mu heard the sound inside and knew that he had settled it himself. She blushed. Chapter 24:51. When Zhou Chongguang returned to the bedroom, it was almost time. It was mainly because Qin Mu's period had come for a few days, and he hadn't hugged her for a week. Tonight, he had accumulated a lot. This was all thanks to his mother. The old woman was anxious to have a grandson, so she kept sending him supplements. Some of them were cooked, but Qin Mu didn't want to eat them, and he didn't want her to think too much, so most of them went into his stomach. He was at the age of youth, and he had taken so many supplements, so his demand was naturally great. Moreover, he was also very interested in his wife. Usually, he would not miss her for 5 days a week. After a week, he had long been unable to bear it. He pulled her into his arms and lay quietly. He was also thinking about something in his heart, and he only felt that the time was very good. Qin Mu hadn't fallen asleep yet. Smelling his scent, she propped her head up and asked, "You didn't take any precautions tonight, did you?" Zhou Chongguang poked her forehead in amusement. "Don't you know whether I'm useful or not?" "I was dizzy, so I didn't pay attention," she said honestly. Zhou Chongguang couldn't help saying, "The touch is different, right?" Qin Mu yawned and said, "There's no difference." She finally fell asleep because of exhaustion, leaving Zhou Chongguang in a mess. How could it be the same? How could he be the same as a man-made product? He really wanted to wake her up and let her feel the difference. But seeing that she was sleepy, he still couldn't bear to, so he kissed her lightly and whispered, "Go to sleep, Mumu." The next day was Saturday, and Zhou Chongguang didn't need to go to work, so he could naturally sleep with his wife for a while. He didn't wake up until 9 o'clock. He opened his eyes and looked at Qin Mu. She was still asleep. She was probably exhausted these days. Tang Sher was pregnant, and many things at the wedding were done by Mumu himself. He felt a little sorry for her when he saw her tired at night. He knew that part of the reason she worked so hard was because of her guilt. He didn't feel guilty at first, but he felt guilty because of his wife. She shouldn't have to bear this. Luckily, the one raised by Yi Muyun's family was a silly and adorable fellow that didn't hold a grudge. Now, the two young ladies were as good as before. When he saw that Qin Mu was happy, he let her be. It was just that he would be her chauffeur every day. Downstairs, there was a voice. He recognized his mother's voice, so he got up quietly. He didn't disturb Qin Mu, so he put on a nightgown and went downstairs. Mother Zhou was making soup downstairs. It was very nutritious, and when she saw Zhou Chongguang coming down, she glanced at him. "It's so late, Qin Mu still hasn't woken up, right?" Zhou Chongguang smiled lazily. "Not yet. His brother got married yesterday, so we came back a little late. Although he said so, Zhou Chongguang's mother was experienced. She knew what was going on when she saw her son's face, so she snorted and said, "Qin Mu must be tired because of you." Then, while making the soup, she seemed to be talking to herself. "Take it easy. I heard that if you want to have children, you can't sleep with each other every day." Zhou Chongguang couldn't help interrupting his mother. "Mom, I told you, we don't want children for the time being. If you don't want children, how are you going to make medicine for Qin Mu to recuperate?" Zhou Chongguang's mother put down the soup in her hand and looked serious. "Don't say no. Don't tell me that it's a tonic. I'm old, but I'm not stupid." Chapter 2452. Mom, Qin Mu's menstrual cycle is a little irregular. If she adjusts it, it might not be so painful in the future. Mama Zhou poked him. "You only know how to dote on your wife." But she still forced a smile. "Anyway, I don't care. You have to get pregnant within a year, or else, just adopt one." Zhou Chongguang knew that he was trying to sound her out, but he deliberately said it casually. Mama Zhou glanced at him. "Of course, you can adopt one if you can't give birth. But she's still young, so she has to work hard. Chongguang, your wife doesn't want to have children." "No." Zhou Chongguang coaxed his mother and smiled. "How can that be? Qin Mu likes children." Mama Zhou was comforted. "That's good. I'm most afraid that your wife will be too delicate and not want to give birth. Now that you said that she likes children, that's good. It's just a minor illness, and it will be fine after some treatment." Then, she warned her son. "You have to be gentle with women. Don't spoil Qin Mu's body, understand?" Zhou Chongguang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How can I spoil her?" Then, he coughed. "Qin Mu's body is quite soft." Mama Zhou laughed and hit him. "Don't be serious. Only Qin Mu can forgive you for those ridiculous things in the past," she sighed. "Treat her well in the future. There's no rush in having a child. Qin Mu is only 22 years old, right? She'll only be 23 during the new year. There will be plenty of opportunities." Zhou Chongguang laughed and didn't say anything more. At this moment, he looked up unexpectedly and saw Qin Mu standing in the middle of the second floor, looking at them quietly. He didn't know how long she had been standing there, watching and listening. He panicked. He was afraid that she would overthink, so he walked over quickly and said softly, "Why are you awake? You'll catch a cold if you wear so little." Qin Mu's calm face squeezed out a smile. "I heard you talking to Mom, so I came down to take a look." As she said that, she called out to Mama Zhou. Mama Zhou was quite satisfied. She had thought things through recently and was in a good mood. She found Qin Mu pleasing to the eye in every aspect. Even though Qin Mu was pampered, she still respected her elders. She didn't lose any face in front of her friends and family. Her only wish was to have a grandson. Granddaughter was fine too. It didn't matter if it was a man or a woman. Qin Mu retracted his gaze and looked at Zhou Chongguang, asking in a low voice, "Did I prepare more supplements for you?" Seeing her normal expression, Zhou Chongguang also breathed a sigh of relief, smiled and pinched her little face. "Originally is your tonic, have the nerve to say." Qin Mu imitated him and lowered his voice, "But if you drink it, I'll be the unlucky one." Mu was, and she. Qin, and, Qin. With that, she turned around and ran. Zhou Chongguang's heart couldn't take it anymore. He didn't care if his mother was around or what she had just said. He grabbed Qin Mu and dragged her upstairs. He raised his head and said to his mother, "Mom, we'll come down in an hour for lunch. Make more soup, I need to nourish myself." When Chinmu heard that, she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. He was too shameless. And this was too much. Everyone in the villa would know what they were up to. Besides, she was shameless to do that in front of her mother-in-law. How was she going to face her mother-in-law in the future? But Mr. Zhou didn't care. She was the one who flirted with him. He had to destroy it. Chapter 2453. Chinmu was helpless. She could only lean against his handsome face and say in a low voice, "If your mother is here, she will have a problem with me." Zhou Chongwang's eyes were tinged with a hint of a smile. His body hung above her, and he seemed to be thinking for a while before saying, "Then I'll let you go, and I'll double the compensation tonight, okay?" Chinmu nibbled his chin with some disdain. "You do it every day, Zhou Chongwang. Are you tired of it?" Zhou Chongwang chuckled. "Of course not." As he said, he moved closer to her ear, his breath erratic. "I'll never get tired of it." Chinmu rolled her eyes at him and pushed him. "Be serious. Go down, or your mother will really think that we're doing something up there." "It doesn't matter what we're doing. My mother will be happy to see it happen." Zhou Chongwang nibbled her neck carefully. After a while, he probably felt that he had teased her enough, so he propped himself up and patted her little face. "Then I'll go down first. Come down after you wash up. Remember to wear more clothes, okay?" As he said that, he got out of bed and walked to the changing room. Soon, he changed into a set of home clothes. Chinmu lay down and calmed down. When he passed by, he came over and pinched her little face again. Chinmu made a face at him. Zhou Chongwang smiled and went downstairs in a good mood. Of course, he drank the tonic soup that his mother specially made for him. He knew that Chinmu didn't like it, so he drank her share too. Chinmu's body was cold, so she couldn't tolerate these yang tonics. He didn't want to tell his mother directly, so he drank it all himself. There were several times when Zhou Zong had a nosebleed, but he was willing to drink it. When Mrs. Zhou turned around, she found that her son had finished the tonics. She patted his hand. "You finished it for your wife again." Zhou Chongwang elegantly touched his lower lip. "It's quite delicious." "I didn't notice it." Mother Zhou glanced at him. "How could you not notice? You clearly did it on purpose." Zhou Chongwang smiled and said, "Mom, don't do these things in the future. I don't need them, and Moo doesn't like them." Mother Zhou was silent for a while and nodded. "Okay, I will come less in the future." "That's not what I meant." Zhou Chongwang sighed softly and said, "When you're free, you should come here often. Moo also likes your cooking." Mother Zhou's eyes turned red. "You only know how to coax me." "Of course not." Zhou Chongwang laughed. "It's true. Moo loves it very much." As he spoke, he looked upstairs. "I'll go see why she hasn't come down yet." Mother Zhou also urged him. "It's been a long time. Quickly go and see if he's feeling unwell." Thinking back to the joke that her son had made just now, it was probably because his wife was embarrassed and refused to come down because she was shy. Zhou Chongwang smiled and walked up the stairs slowly. He had a feeling that Chinmu had heard what they had said. In the master bedroom, Chinmu was half lying in the bathtub. She looked up at the crystal lamp above her head in a daze. Yes, she had heard it. She had heard Zhou Chongwang's mother say that she wanted grandchildren. She had also heard them say that there was a small problem with her body. Zhou Chongwang said that she was recuperating. The Chinese medicine that she had taken that was difficult to swallow was to recuperate her body. If it was just a small problem, why didn't he tell her? Instead, he told her that they would have children a few years later. He said that he wanted to play for a few more years. Chapter 2454. Qin was in a mess. If they hadn't reconciled, it wouldn't have mattered if she couldn't have children. But now, she had an indescribable feeling. She saw him speaking up for her in front of his mother, negotiating for her, and even hiding it from her. All of this could be said to make her feel that his love for her was real. She also believed that even if they didn't have children, he would always be good to her. But Qin didn't think that she would be willing to watch the mother and son argue about having children forever. She didn't dare to think about it. If her body really needed a long time to recuperate, then what would their marriage become? Would Zhou Chongwang's love for her be twisted? Could she still love him like before? Qin knew that she wasn't a person who could be wronged. At least, she wouldn't be wronged for the rest of her life. It wasn't her fault that she couldn't have children, but if she couldn't have children, it would be her fault in front of Mother Zhou. Her heart was in a mess. In the end, she closed her eyes slightly and refused to think about it. Zhou Chongwang stood at the door for a long time, looking at her in a daze. She didn't even realize that he had been standing there for a long time. She heard it. But at this moment, Zhou Chongwang didn't want to expose her because his mother was here. He didn't want to talk to her about this now. He still firmly believed that he shouldn't drag the elderly into the matters between husband and wife. In the future, he would take time to travel abroad with Qin. It could be considered a form of relaxation. He walked over slowly and didn't wake her up until he squatted at the edge of the bathtub. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Her voice was a little hoarse. "Zhou Chongwang. Why are you out of practice again?" He put his hand into the water and then frowned. "The water is getting cold. You'll catch a cold." So he grabbed a bath towel, picked her up with one hand, and wrapped her in the bath towel. He carried her straight into the master bedroom. She was obviously still absent-minded. He sighed softly. After all, she was only 22 years old. There were many things that couldn't be hidden, but they still showed. He gave up on letting her go downstairs. Instead, he pressed her forehead and coaxed her in a low voice, "If you're not feeling well, just lie down here. I'll make some porridge for you, okay?" At this time, Qin is also very afraid to meet Mother Zhou. She doesn't know how to deal with it. She is still not used to disguise herself. Thus, he nodded. "Yes, my head is a little dizzy." He smiled in understanding, but there was a trace of bitterness in his heart. Qin must be feeling terrible right now, but he didn't know how to tell her. Zhou Chongwang's expression was a little heavy, but it returned to normal after he went downstairs. Mother Zhou looked at him. "Is your wife really not feeling well?" "It's a little hot, probably because I didn't control myself last night." Zhou Chongwang took the initiative to carry the pot and then went to make porridge. Mother Zhou looked at him and sighed in her heart. Although the two of them didn't have any children, their feelings for each other weren't wrong. Moreover, Chongwang had completely taken care of his family now. He wasn't like the past, where he didn't have a home and couldn't see anyone. Now, he seemed to have returned to his previous self. Mother Zhou's heart was filled with emotions and joy. She originally wanted to go upstairs to see Qin, but she felt that it was a little inappropriate. So she told her son a few words. "If the medicine doesn't work, you have to see a doctor." Chapter 2455. Mrs. Zhou said seriously again, "You have to control yourself. You used to be crazy at such a young age, but now you're even crazier." Zhou Chongguang smiled. Then why did you send me supplements? Mrs. Zhou glanced at him. It's my fault. You're the one who didn't control yourself. Zhou Chongguang just smiled and opened the door for his mother to get in the car. Watching the black RV slowly drive away, he breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally sent her away. Then, he quickly returned to the kitchen. The porridge was ready. He filled a bowl and brought it upstairs. Qin Mu leaned against the headboard and said softly, "Has your mother gone back?" He nodded and walked over gently. He put down the tray and sat by the bed. He reached out and touched her head. "She told me to control myself and not to tire you out." Qin Mu's face was slightly red. She looked at him and her lips moved. Zhou Chongguang knew what she wanted to say, so he stopped her and brought the porridge over. "Eat something first." Then, he added, "Mumu, we have a lifetime to talk about it, understand?" A lifetime. Qin Mu was a little stunned for a moment, and then she was scalded. Zhou Chongguang reached out and said, "Spit it out if it's hot." Qin Mu's eyes were filled with tears. She looked at him eagerly, but she still couldn't accept it. He didn't think it was dirty, but she thought it was too strange. So her little face wrinkled and twisted. Zhou Chongguang looked at her helplessly and found it funny. She had probably never been so embarrassed before. When she finally swallowed it, he reached out and patted her. "It's so big, but it's still scalded." There was an indescribable love in his tone. When Qin Mu heard this, her little mouth flattened. She stared at him pitifully as her tears fell one by one into the bowl. Zhou Chongguang looked at her little face, his expression as deep as water. He gently stroked her little face with his fingers and asked very softly, "Why are you crying? Do you think my porridge is not delicious?" Qin Mu shook her head. He took the porridge to the side and pulled her into his embrace with one hand. She was very thin, and nestled in his broad embrace, she seemed especially small. After hugging her for a while, he asked in a hoarse voice, "What's wrong?" Qin Mu bit her lip, buried her head in his shoulder, and smelled his pleasant scent. "Zhou Chongguang, can I not have children?" There was something deep in Zhou Chongguang's eyes, but he didn't let her see his expression. Instead, he continued in a gentle voice, "How could that be? Mumu, you're still so young. Didn't I say to wait for a few more years?" She hugged his neck with her little hands, raised her head, and looked at him very seriously. "Then what was the medicine I drank?" Little by little, Zhou Chongguang's eyes started to tear up. He knew that even if he didn't say it, she would still ask Qin Chen or even Dr. Bai. She would eventually find out. So, he loosened up a little and hugged her intimately as if he was hugging a baby. His voice was calm. "Your body is a little cold, so the chances of you getting pregnant are lower. That's why I want to adjust your body. Otherwise, it won't be good if you give birth to a child." He said it very casually, but Qin Mu didn't quite believe him, because he didn't answer her question directly. However, if she continued to ask, he would have to say the result, and it would seem that she was being unreasonable. Chapter 2456. Qin Mu looked down and didn't continue asking. She just grunted and squeezed out a smile. "I want to eat porridge." "You're already in tears and you still want to eat it." He laughed. "It's too salty. I'll get another bowl." She grabbed his hand. "No need, I'm not afraid of salty food." After she said that, Zhou Chongguang bit her little ear and said passionately, "You like salty food, huh?" Qin Mu was speechless. At a time like this, he could actually have such thoughts. However, she also knew that he was probably trying to move her thoughts away. Thus, she placed her little face on his shoulder and vaguely gave a sound of agreement. Although he didn't do anything, Zhou Zong's heart was rippling. He wanted to do something, but now wasn't a good time, so he had to bear with it no matter what. Qin Mu obediently ate a bowl of porridge. She was pretending to be sick, but after eating a bowl of porridge, she really broke out in a sweat and fell asleep. Zhou Chongguang wiped her body with a hot towel again. After she fell asleep, he took his laptop and kept her company while he dealt with his work. When Qin Mu woke up, it was already 2:00 in the afternoon. As soon as she woke up, Zhou Chongguang closed his laptop and walked over to kiss her little face. He said softly, "You're awake." Qin Mu grunted and looked around. Seeing his laptop, she hugged him. "You've been here the whole time." "Yeah," he said mildly. "I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to find me when you woke up." Qin Mu hugged him softly like a little lamb. After a while, she said softly, "I want to take a shower." He grunted. "I'll carry you there. We'll go out to eat later, huh?" Qin Mu didn't want to go out at first, but he seemed to be in high spirits, so she nodded. "Okay. Let's go to Zhao Yan's restaurant," he said casually. Qin Mu glanced at him. "Childish." Zhou Chongguang chuckled. "Won't you make me jealous?" He carried Qin Mu to take a shower, but she remembered something and bit her lip. "I don't think I've taken my medicine today." When she spoke, her expression was cautious. His heart ached a little. Because she was afraid of taking this medicine, she refused to take it before, but now, she took the initiative to want to take the medicine. Her heart must be uncomfortable. Zhou Chongguang lowered his head and rubbed her little head with his forehead. His voice was extremely gentle. "Mumu, we won't take medicine today. I'll take you to have a big meal, okay?" She hugged his neck. How could she not know what he was thinking? She said softly, "Zhou Chongguang, I'm fine." With that, she lowered her eyes and said in a very low voice, "I want a child." She looked up at him and said again, "I want to have a child with you." "Zhou Chongguang, I want to give it a try." His heart suddenly became wet. He pressed hard against her little face and sighed. Silly Mumu. How could she be so silly? It was clearly him who was so bad. What was she thinking now? He lowered his head and said softly, "Mumu, we can take it easy about the child. If it really doesn't work, we can adopt it. Don't be too stressed." Qin Mu bit her lip and looked at him tenderly like a little animal. "Really?" Zhou Chongguang smiled. "Of course it's true." Chapter 2457. Qin Mu sighed. "Will your mother agree?" "I'll convince her." He kissed the corner of her mouth again. "Of course, I think 3 years is enough for us to have a child." For some reason, Zhou Chongguang had a strong feeling that he and Qin Mu would have a child. He could feel it. Of course, he didn't tell her that if his mother hadn't found out about Qin Mu's problem, he would have said that it was his own problem. But now it was too late. Although Qin Mu's conversation with him seemed to have calmed her down, she also felt that her physical problem was not as easy as he said. However, she didn't ask further. He was not willing to give up, so she was willing to cooperate and give him a child. If there was no fate, she thought they might be able to adopt 1 or 2 children. Zhou Chongguang put Qin Mu down and said hoarsely, "You take a shower first. I'll wait for you outside." However, Qin Mu reached out and hugged him, unwilling to let go. His other slender arm turned on the shower head, and instantly, warm water splashed down. Zhou Chongguang's clothes were neat and tidy, but in an instant, he was completely drenched. He looked at her. On the other hand, Qin Mu was like a little demoness as she unbuttoned his shirt. Her voice was so soft and tender that it could take one's life. "The clothes are all wet." Zhou Chongguang, do you want to wash together? He couldn't help laughing. When he opened his mouth, his voice was extremely hoarse. Mrs. Zhou is so enthusiastic. Of course. With that, he leaned over and kissed her lips. His big palm took her little hand down, and his action was extremely aggressive. She was the one who caused the fire, but at this time, her little hand was trembling terribly. Are you afraid? Zhou Chongguang's voice was also extremely hot, and even a little shaky. I will teach you. He had always been in charge of the affairs between them, and he was reluctant to teach her those things. However, he was a man after all. Sometimes, he would step out of line, like now, when his little wife took the initiative. As a result, the entanglement in the bathroom didn't end until 5 o'clock. Qin Mu's legs were weak, but Zhou Chongguang was still very energetic, as if he could come again. Qin Mu punched his shoulder and complained, "Where did your mother get this tonic? It's so powerful." His face sank on her shoulder and he chuckled. "Mumu, you've begged me time and time again. I don't need any supplements." Qin Mu reached out and hit him. He chuckled, but finally let her go. When they left, it was already 7 o'clock. It was cold at night, so he wrapped her up tightly. He wore a white down jacket and a red scarf, revealing only his eyes. There was no way to go to the restaurant, so in the end, they decided to walk to a nearby restaurant for dinner. Zhou Chongguang held her hand, like an old couple, warm and peaceful. On the way, many people looked at them enviously. They both looked good, especially Zhou Chongguang, who was wearing a dark gray coat and a light brown sweater inside. He looked handsome and cold. Qin Mu looked much more easygoing, but her figure was there, and she was the highlight of any crowd. Her long hair was tied in a ponytail, and she looked pure and cute. Many college students looked at her. Zhou Chongguang was a little jealous. He reached out and pinched her little face. "Mrs. Zhou, you've actually been married for 4 years. Chapter 2458. Zhou Chongguang lowered his head slightly and pressed his lips against her forehead. He lowered his voice and said, "I should dress you up in the future. That way, you won't have to provoke little boys." Qin Mu smiled happily. "Zhou Chongguang, are you jealous?" "Yes." He sighed and said, "I'm jealous, Mrs. Zhou, if this makes you feel happy." Qin Mu laughed. Then, he took off his scarf. His lips came up to hers and he kissed her cherishly. As he pecked her little mouth, he said softly, "I still feel very excited when an old couple kisses. What about you, Mumu?" Qin Mu hugged his waist and lowered her eyes. Her breathing was a little chaotic. "Me too." As soon as she finished speaking, he kissed her deeply and deepened the kiss. In the distance, someone was setting off fireworks. The fireworks were set off in the night sky, adding some warmth to the cold night. Under the fire, he held her little face and kissed her deeply. "Mumu, no matter what, don't let go of my hand." After the kiss, he pressed his forehead against hers and murmured. It was a promise, but also a request. Qin Mu's little hand slowly climbed over and clasped his fingers tightly. Sometimes, love was so simple. They fell in love, after 4 years of not very good marriage, after she was disappointed in him. Their fingers were clasped together, so it was not so cold. Later, he did not let go of her little hand. He kept holding her little hand to eat a simple dinner and watched a movie like an ordinary couple. Qin Mu cried several times when she saw Li Fangfang's "Nothing to Ask." Zhou Chongguang kept handing her tissues. Later, he simply hugged her in his arms and coaxed her. When she cried, he could wipe her tears with his sleeve, or he could kiss them away. This kind of sweetness surpassed that of a newlywed. When they left the theater, Qin Mu was still immersed in the plot. Zhou Chongguang hugged his little wife and said with a chuckle, "Children have a low threshold for tears. You're cold-blooded." Qin Mu snorted softly, "Merchants are all cold-blooded." "All right, I'm cold-blooded. I'll warm you up tonight." He chuckled and reached out to hold her little hand. Qin Mu's face turned red. He really did not give up on taking advantage of her for even a moment. The two of them walked home for about half an hour. After walking for about 10 minutes, Qin Mu made a fuss about wanting to call a taxi. Zhou Chongguang, on the other hand, was rather fond of this peaceful time alone. In the end, he had no choice but to piggyback his young lady. Qin Mu was quite happy. Lying on his back, she was as curious as a little girl. Zhou Chongguang laughed at her. "Qin Mu, you must have been unpopular at home before." "No." Qin Mu wrinkled her nose. "It's because we have too many children in our family." She counted. "Big brother is not alone, me, Qin Mo, Anlin, and Lan." Zhou Chongguang was about to faint when he heard this. "By the way, aren't you and Qin Mo compatriots? Why did it become Qin Chen?" Qin Mu paused for a moment before saying, "Qin Chen is an Lan Lan, he is abroad and hasn't come back." As for the middle, she couldn't explain it for a while. The outside world always thought that Qin Chen and she were twins, but in fact, they were not. She and Qin Mo were. But after a long time, their children also thought that this was the case. It was mainly Lan Lan. Qin Yun. Chapter 2459. Zhou Chongguang heard the sigh in her tone, so he softened his voice and said, "Tell me when you have the chance in the future, okay?" Qin Mu nodded and leaned on his shoulder again. She said with a chuckle, old ma, hurry up." He couldn't help laughing and reached out to pat her butt. "You know how to command people, don't you?" "It's obviously old ma." She leaned on his shoulder and smiled happily. At this time, there were still some fireworks going off in the distance, which made her little face bright and very beautiful. Zhou Chongguang was so angry that he leaned over and kissed her. Qin Mu also let him kiss her generously, because she was afraid that he wouldn't carry her and wanted to put her down. After carrying her like this for half an hour, he finally carried her home. He put her down in the courtyard, where the lights above were a little dim. "Mumu, have you gained some confidence in me tonight?" Zhou Chongguang took her little hand and didn't let her go home immediately. Qin Mu blinked and pretended to be stupid. "You have good stamina." "Qin Mu." Zhou Chongguang's voice was a little reproachful. Qin Mu smiled and looked at him. "I know. Zhou Chongguang, I said I wouldn't give up easily." She held his hand. "If you don't let go, I won't let go." His eyes were a little deep, and he looked at her without saying a word. Qin Mu did the same. Their eyes met. After a long time, he said in a low voice, "Okay. Mumu, remember what you said." He led her upstairs. It was already 11 o'clock. When they returned to the bedroom, he asked her to rest first and he had something urgent to deal with. In fact, at 8 o'clock, Xiaozi had urged him lightly, but he had been ignoring him. Qin Mu looked at him and grunted in acknowledgement. Zhou Chongguang kissed her forehead. "I'm going to the study. I'll be back in a while." Qin Mu nodded obediently and even hugged and kissed him. Zhou Chongguang's eyes were full of tenderness. He reached out and rubbed her long hair. "If you're sleepy, you can sleep first, okay?" Qin Mu softly agreed. Seeing her like this, he simply didn't want to leave. However, Xiaozi had called him more than 10 times, so he had to reply. With great difficulty, he finally left the master bedroom and hurried to the study, closing the door behind him. He dialed Zhao Ziyi's cell phone. After a while, the call went through. After Zhao Ziyi said something, Zhou Chongguang's cell phone slipped from his hand. "Chongguang, I'm not sure yet." Zhao Ziyi was still talking, but Zhou Chongguang could no longer hear him. After a long time, he picked up his phone. Fortunately, Zhao Ziyi was still there. Zhou Chongguang's voice was low. "Help me investigate. Also, don't tell anyone." Zhao Ziyi nodded. "All right." After hanging up, Zhou Chongguang fell into deep thought. He smoked one cigarette after another until his nerves were almost numb. His heart was in so much pain. When he returned to the bedroom at 2:00 in the morning, Qin Mu was already asleep. She was lying on her side, hugging his pillow. Her little face was buried and she looked very dependent on him. She was still young and still looked like a little wife. Especially since he had been pampering her recently, her skin had become much fairer and more tender, making her look even younger. Zhou Chongguang walked over lightly and sat down beside her, pursing his thin lips. He didn't do anything but just sat beside her and watched, as if she would fly away in the blink of an eye. Chapter 2460. He was not in the mood, but he still took a shower and brushed his teeth carefully, because she liked to be clean. After lying on the bed, he pulled the pillow away from her hand and held her carefully in his arms. This was the woman he loved and wanted to be good to for the rest of his life. He looked at her and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Mumu, if I don't let go of your hand, you won't let go either, okay?" However, Qin Mu had been asleep, so she probably couldn't hear him. He looked at her until dawn, and then he took a nap for 2 hours. When Qin Mu woke up, she smelled the smell of Chinese medicine and instinctively wanted to vomit. She hated the smell so much, but Zhou Chongguang spent an hour making medicine for her every day, rain or shine. No matter how much she didn't want to drink it, she had to pinch her nose and drink it for the sake of his hard work. Moreover, she wanted to have a child with him now. Qin Mu wanted to get up, but Zhou Chongguang had already come upstairs with the medicine. Qin Mu pinched her nose and said in a low voice, "It looks so bitter." Her voice was small and soft, like that of a little sheep. The bitterness in Zhou Chongguang's heart was blown away a little. He stood at the door and smiled. "Didn't you want to drink it yesterday? Now that it's done, you think it's bitter." He walked over, put the medicine aside, and then took out 2 plums. "Eat one first, and then drink it later, okay?" Qin Mu looked at him with her bright eyes. "Where did you get it?" "Old Chen wants it. He loves his wife, so he always buys some." Zhou Chongguang said, "I'll buy 2 caddies for you later." Qin Mu ate one. Although it was a little sour, it tasted much better than the medicine. As she ate, she looked at him and said with some disdain, "Don't learn from my brother's bad habits. Why do you have to call him brother? You're a pervert." She unconsciously said bad things about her brother. Zhou Chongguang smiled and pushed her long hair back. "See, now that you've married into the Zhou family, you're finally not on the same side as Yi Muyun. Ever since he shamelessly came to the Tang family, he's no longer on the same side as me." Qin Mu suddenly turned into a child as she excitedly said, "Zhou Chongguang, you must not know this, right? Big brother wanted to be the Tang family's son-in-law at the age of 10. He ran to Uncle Tang himself and asked him to raise him." As she spoke, she laughed. "You don't know how black my father's face was at that time. He said that others would laugh at him, Qin Anlin, for not being able to raise a child." Zhou Chongguang laughed along with her. "What happened next?" Tang Yu agreed just like that. "Yes." Qin Mu nodded. "My brother has been black-bellied since he was a child. Uncle Tang probably saw his potential before. Think about it now. Big brother has worked so hard for the Tang family. I heard that he returned all his shares to share when they got married. As she spoke, Mrs. Zhou looked at Mr. Zhou sympathetically. Including the 5% you gave me. Zhou Chongwang did not mind and chuckled. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Besides, Tang's share and it's all in the past. Nothing happened between us. Qin Mu sneered. Some people seem to have forgotten their dark history. Have they forgotten how shamelessly they followed me to New York? Mrs. Zhou, you're young and ignorant. Zhou Chongwang laughed. Also, you should take your medicine. You're talking nonsense. Do you think you don't need to take your medicine? Chapter 2461. I have to be stricter with a little kid like you. Zhou Chongwang coaxed her and fed her one mouthful at a time. Although Qin Mu was unwilling, she pinched her nose and drank the plum in one go after thinking about it. Baby, you're great. He opened his hands and peeled the plum for her to eat. Qin Mu couldn't stand him anymore and glared at him. Don't do that to my brother. I'm not eating it. Then which style do you like? Zhou Chongwang pinched her little face. Qin Mu slapped his hand away, blushing. Zhou Chongwang leaned over and kissed her deeply, sharing the taste of the medicine in her mouth with her. At first, Qin Mu was a little resistant. It wasn't good, but she couldn't reject him when he kissed her deeply. She could only accept his kiss helplessly. Again and again. After the kiss, he kissed her little face again. I'll wait for you downstairs. I'll send you to see the gallery later, okay? Qin Mu nodded. Okay. She looked quite obedient. He couldn't help but touch her little face again and go down first. However, the moment he turned around, his face darkened slightly. He walked downstairs slowly and prepared breakfast before Qin Mu came down. When Qin Mu came down the stairs, he still had a smile on his face. She couldn't see anything. Qin Mu bit the croissant he prepared and said calmly, Zhou Chongwang, when do you think my brother and Cher are going to come back from their honeymoon? Zhou Chongwang smiled. It's just that Shui is back. She's pregnant. What do you think she can do? Qin Mu bit her lip. Even if she can't help, I'll take a look. After a while, she sat beside him and hugged his waist with her little hands, speaking in a low voice, Chongwang, Shui is pregnant. It's hard for her to get pregnant as well. Now that she's pregnant, does that mean that I can get pregnant as well? He could hear the uneasiness in her voice, as well as a little disappointment. His gaze became extremely gentle. He lowered his head and pressed it against her little face. He sighed softly. There will be Moo. We will definitely have children. Qin Mu nodded and sat up straight again. Her temperament had become a lot livelier recently, probably because of his excessive pampering. And he liked it very much. Zhou Chongwang waited for her to finish eating and then went outside to wait for her in the car. Women always needed to tidy up before going out. Qin Mu walked over slowly. Zhou Chongwang reached out to open the car door for her. He smiled and said, You look beautiful today. Today, she was wearing a Chanel jacket, her brown curly hair was well combed, and her shoes were exquisite. It was rare for her to dress up like this. As Qin Mu sat in the car, he was still looking at her. Did you tidy up because you're going out with me? Qin Mu glanced at him, buckled her seatbelt, and smiled. I heard that the landlord is quite handsome. Qin Mu, Zhou Chongwang said with a hint of warning in his tone, will he be as handsome as your husband? Qin Mu chuckled. You know, after being married for a long time, there's not so much novelty. She was just joking with him, but Zhou Chongguang was very fussy. He reached out and pinched her little face. Moo, say that you'll never leave me. Qin Mu was surprised, and then she smiled helplessly. Zhou Chongguang, when did you become like a child? You're so fussy. But Zhou Chongguang didn't laugh. He kept looking at her. Chapter 2462. He still didn't speak. She was a little flustered and shook his arm carefully. Zhou Chongguang. He seemed to come back to his senses. Looking at Qin Mu, he leaned over and hugged her gently. Me too. I won't leave you. Qin Mu was thrown into his arms. Her little face rested on his shoulder and she felt his heartbeat. After a long time, he let go of her and didn't talk as much as before. It was a little silent in the car until they reached the place she chose. It was a very good location. It was located in the elite section of B City. It was a full 800 square meters, and the annual rent was probably a few million yuan. However, Zhou Chongguang didn't care about that. As long as Qin Mu was happy, it didn't matter whether he earned money or not. As Qin Mu said, the landlord was very young and very handsome. He was very much like Li Zian in Love and the Producer. In reality, he was another male version of Qin Chen, a real man. Zhou Chongguang watched his little wife socialize with other men and watched her smile and discuss things with others. In Zhou Zong's eyes, the landlord had successfully become a male mistress. Every smile, in Zhou Zong's eyes, was extremely hateful. Qin Mu occasionally saw her husband's expression and felt that he was very cute. However, she didn't pay attention to him. If he was jealous like this, she would have died a long time ago because of what he had done in the past. Qin Mu and the landlord quickly negotiated the rent. She paid a deposit of 20 yuan first, which was considered to be a deal. The rest would be paid in 2 days after the contract was drawn up. From the beginning to the end, she behaved very independently and didn't need Zhou Chongguang to show up. Gradually, Zhou Chongguang also realized this. All these years, Qin Mu had been staying at home, but she was not unfamiliar with these things in the outside world at all. This actually made Zhou Chongguang feel a sense of crisis, which meant that Qin Mu could live well without him. His back was drenched in cold sweat. After Qin Mu finished talking, she tilted her head to look at him and asked curiously, Zhou Chongguang, what's wrong? He forced a smile and opened the door to let her get in. After he got in the car, he smiled and said, nothing. Qin Mu sat beside him and said softly, are you under a lot of pressure? What? His voice was hoarse as he tilted his head to look at her. Qin Mu smiled faintly. I'm saying, pregnant. Don't compare yourself to your brother. That's not what I meant. He was still looking at her with a curious expression. In the end, Qin Mu stuck out her tongue and finally said, I mean, you're already very powerful. You don't need to feel inferior in this aspect. Zhou Chongguang's eyes were tinged with a hint of a smile, and his voice was soft, idiot. With that said, he pulled her into his embrace and hugged her tightly. Qin Mu could feel how much he cared for her in his embrace. Her voice was light as a feather. Zhou Chongguang, if we can't have a child, can I be your child? I can act cute every day, and I'm not worse than Cher at all. Why are you comparing yourself to her? He patted her back gently. You are you, not someone else. His little fool nodded blankly and then quickly said, I just saw that you were depressed today, so I wanted to comfort you. He reached out to touch his chin and laughed at himself. Maybe it's early menopause. Qin Mu understood and nodded hard. Probably. Chapter 2463. Zhou Chongwang smiled and started the car. As he drove, he asked casually, "Are you going to your mother's place or go home first?" Qin Mu glanced at him. "I thought you would invite me to your office." Zhou Chongwang smiled and then looked at her meaningfully. "I want to check the post." Qin Mu snorted. "Why would I check the post when I'm with you? If I want to check, I should do it on my own." Zhou Chongwang was silent for a long time before he said in a low voice, "It won't happen again. It won't happen again." Qin Mu knew what he was talking about. She pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "I don't mean to bring up the past." Because she would be looking for trouble if she talked about it. Zhou Chongwang smiled. "Good girl." Qin Mu's voice suddenly became fierce. "Throw that sofa away. I don't want to see it again." He deliberately coaxed her. "I'll change my office and use that place as a warehouse, okay?" Qin Mu snorted and did not answer him. She didn't believe him. He only knew how to coax her. But after a while, she still said, "I'll go to my mother's place. You seem to have a lot of work these days." He held the steering wheel with one hand and pinched her little face with the other. "It sounds like you have a conscience." Qin Mu stared at him. Zhou Chongwang smiled and turned the car to the Qin family's place. Half an hour later, he dropped her off. When Qin Mu got out of the car, she was still a little dependent. "You, get off work early." He leaned over and kissed her little face. His voice was a little hoarse. "I'll pick you up tonight." Qin Mu got out of the car, waved at him, and watched the car drive away. Behind her, a little person hugged her body and said in a soft voice, "Aunt." Qin Mu immediately knew that it was Xiao Yishu. She smiled and turned around with the little fellow in her arms. She really could eat. In just a few days, she had gained a little weight. Qin Mu really liked her and kissed her. "What delicious food did you eat?" She took a whiff of the milky fragrance and was as intoxicated as Yi Muyun. Xiao Yishu hugged her with her chubby hands and pointed at Yi Liangqiu. "Grandma, Grandma," Qin Mu corrected her with a smile, "It's Grandma." Xiao Yishu reached out to hold her face and gave her a sweet kiss. Yi Liangqiu walked over and hugged Xiao Yishu. Then, she smiled at her little daughter. "She likes you very much." Yi Liangqiu looked at Xiao Yishu and was overjoyed. On one hand, Xiao Yishu was really cute, and on the other hand, she looked like Cher when they were young. Yi Liangqiu treated Xiao Yishu well, as if she could make it up to Cher. She knew that after so long, Muyun and Cher were married. Cher did not care, but what happened 8 years ago had always been a knot in Yi Liangqiu's heart. So, she spoiled her granddaughter a little too much. At least, Qin Mu had never seen the siblings being so spoiled. She was afraid that it would melt if she kept it in her mouth. She smiled and held Xiao Yishu's little hand. "It's probably because of our blood relationship." Xiao Yishu was here. Actually, her brother and Cher could not go anywhere. Yishu's body was here. If they touched something, would they have to draw Lan Yu's blood again? The newlyweds just found a resort in B City to enjoy the world of just the two of them. Chapter 2464. Yi Liangqiu held the little baby, and her eyes were always on the little baby's little face. It was really the same as Cher when she was a child. The more she looked at it, the cuter she looked. Yi Liangqiu was such a cold person in the past, but now she was like an ordinary grandmother, kissing her granddaughter again and again. Xiao Yishu was so embarrassed that she buried her little face in Yi Liangqiu's arms. Qin Mu also knew that her mother had taken the little girl to relatives these days and showed her around several times. She was satisfied physically and mentally. Her father had called to complain that he no longer had a sex life. At that time, Qinmu almost spat out a mouthful of water when she heard it. So she wanted to come and have a look. At first glance, she found that her mother's enthusiasm was like those cat owners who were addicted to cats. She couldn't help but say, "Mom, let's let go of the past. You don't have to worry about it anymore." Yi Liangqiu held Xiao Yishu and looked at Qinmu. She sighed slightly. "I know, but I always feel sorry for Cher. You don't have to say anything about your brother, but Cher is really unfair to her. You have felt guilty for so many years." Qinmu stepped forward and hugged her mother's arm from the side. "Mom, if you want to blame someone, blame me. I am not sensible." Yi Liangqiu turned her head and looked at her. She didn't know whether she was glad or not. After all, Qinmu and Zhou Chongguang got along well now. Zhou Chongguang was very concerned about Qinmu, and there were no flowers and plants outside. Qinmu looked at her mother and smiled. In such a happy smile, Yi Liangqiu was also redeemed. The mother and daughter were playing Little Yishu. What? While chatting, Yi Liangqiu was most concerned about the relationship between Qinmu and Zhou Chongguang's mother. After all, the Zhou family and the Qin family still had some conflicts in the past. Qinmu nodded. "It's okay. It's just." She bit her lower lip. His mother seems to be very anxious to have a grandson. Then, Qinmu told her mother the truth. "Mom, didn't Qin Chen tell you?" Of course, Qin Chen would not hide this kind of thing from her mother. Yi Liangqiu hesitated for a moment and nodded. "I heard it from him." Qinmu's expression was a little stunned. After a long time, she said, "Mom, Zhou Chongguang said that if he can't get pregnant, he will adopt a child. I'm afraid that his mother will be unhappy." Yi Liangqiu reached out and stroked her long hair. "The key to this matter is Zhou Chongguang's attitude. He must have thought it through. Besides, you and his mother will not be together. You just look at him coldly occasionally, and then you can act coquettishly to Zhou Chongguang. The most important thing for a husband and wife is the relationship between a husband and wife. Of course, the premise is that you still want to live a good life with him." Qinmu nodded and smiled. Her mood was obviously better. She stayed in the Qin family for a day and talked with her mother about the art gallery. When Yi Liangqiu heard that she was going to run it with Cher, she laughed. "Then you plan to be the shopkeeper alone?" "Mom," Qinmu said discontentedly, "you can't say that in front of Cher." Yi Liangqiu pinched Xiao Yishu's face and said directly, "It's not Cher's problem. It's your brother's problem. Don't be fooled by your brother's high position and power. In fact, he hasn't been weaned yet." Yi Liangqiu criticized her son without any pressure. Qinmu laughed. "Mom, my brother will be furious if he hears it." Chapter 2465. Yi Liangqiu was still smiling. "Look at him. He can't wait to keep his wife by his side 24 hours a day. Isn't this a waste of time for Cher?" Although Qinmu laughed, she still said something fair. "Cher doesn't seem to have any ambitions." Her mother asked with a smile, "Then why did you ask her to cooperate with you?" Well, it was still Jiang Lao who was shrewd. Her mother saw through her in an instant. Qinmu finally confessed, "My brother has a lot of connections. In the future, I will ask Cher to draw a few paintings with a high standard. In order to flatter his wife, my brother will have to spend a lot of money." Yi Liangqiu was annoyed and amused at the same time. "You're thinking about your own family. I've never seen you with such a mind before. I have a lot of tricks and schemes." Qinmu blinked. Seeing her like this, Yi Liangqiu was also satisfied. The two of them chatted and laughed, and the day passed. However, Zhou Chongwang called and said that he would pick her up later. Qin Mu said that it was not necessary, and she went back in the driver's car. When she got home, it was already 8 o'clock. Looking at the parking lot, Zhou Chongwang's car had not come back yet. She took a shower and lay in bed for a long time, reading a book, but he had not come back yet. At 10 o'clock, Qin Mu couldn't help but call, "Zhou Chongwang, when are you coming back?" Her voice was lingering, with a girl's tenderness. Zhou Chongwang's voice was gentle. "I'll be back soon. Be good and go to sleep first." To be honest, Qin Mu was still a little disappointed. She thought that after making up with him, he would be less socialized and at least come home at 8 or 9 o'clock. She didn't know what time it was the first day. However, she had a small temper, and it was not appropriate for her to vent her grievances to him, so she kept silent. On the other side, his voice was low and husky. "You want me to come back early, right?" Qin Mu grunted in acknowledgement. "All right, I'll try my best to come back as soon as possible." His voice was even gentler, revealing an inexplicable exhaustion. Qin Mu was a little disappointed. "It'll take a long time. Soon, be good and sleep early." He coaxed her, not showing the slightest bit of impatience. Qin Mu suddenly became willful. "Then take a video and send it to me now. I want to see what the fourth bureau looks like." The man on the other side stopped breathing. After a while, he asked softly, "Mumu, you don't believe me?" "I just want to see it," she said somewhat unreasonably. At first, she thought that he would be angry, but he didn't. Not only was he not angry, he even took a picture online for her to see. He was indeed in his own office. There was no one around. He was the only one sitting in front of his desk. However, the sofa was still there. Qin Mu's heart was stifled when he saw this, so he quickly hung up. After lying down, she couldn't fall asleep for a while. She tossed and turned, and then she fell asleep in a daze. When Zhou Chongwang came back, it was already 1 o'clock in the night. When he walked into the master bedroom gently, Qin Mu was already asleep. He took off his coat, slowly walked to the bed, sat down, and reached out to caress her little face. She didn't sleep well, and he didn't know if she had cried before she went to bed. A doted little wife would always be a little sentimental, let alone his Mumu. He reached out to touch her little face and whispered, "Mumu, I won't hurt you." At this time, she woke up and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Are you back?" "I'm back." Chapter 2466. Zhou Chongwang still stroked her little face and lowered his head to kiss her. "I'll take a shower first." However, Qin Mu did not let him leave. She put her little arms around his neck and said softly, "I want to hold you for a while. You became so small all of a sudden." He chuckled in a low voice, but he still satisfied her little wish. He gently hugged her and coaxed her as if he were coaxing a baby. Qin Mu's little face rested on his shoulder. Her expression was a little misty. She hugged him for a long time and did not let go. Zhou Chongwang's voice was a little hoarse. "What's wrong with Mumu? Are you angry?" He lowered his head to find her lips and kissed her lightly. "I won't be so late in the future." Qin Mu did not say anything. She just folded her little face between his chin and neck. Her soft appearance made him unable to bear it any longer. He held her little face and kissed her deeply. However, he still cared about her mood and asked, "Mumu, I want you." She did not say anything, but hugged him tighter. Zhou Chongwang followed her direction, pressed her down, and kissed her intensely. As they kissed, his tone changed. He had never been so fierce and rough. At first, Qin Mu was still engrossed, but later, she could not stand it anymore. She raised her head slightly and whispered in his ear, "Zhou Chongguang, be gentle." Only then did he understand. Then he pressed his face against hers and let out a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Mumu. I lost control." Later, he became gentle, but he was a little absent-minded. Fortunately, Qin Mu was too tired and fell asleep. After a while, the thin sweat had already turned cold, but Zhou Chongguang's body was filled with endless emptiness. He did not take a shower immediately. Instead, he held her in such a posture and felt her existence. His eyes, has been staring at her, did not blink, for fear that she will disappear. It was not until his eyes were sore that he closed them and murmured her name, Mumu. He carried her to take a shower. Qin Mu had been asleep the entire time and wasn't very cooperative, but he still insisted on washing her. When they returned to the bedroom, she was asleep, so he carried her and did it twice more. He wanted to give her a child. A child was too important to him. A child should be able to let her stay by his side safely. No matter what happened, she just needed to stay behind him safely. Child. Zhou Chongguang buried his face in her neck. He had never longed for a child so much. Early in the morning, when Qin Mu woke up, Zhou Chongguang was still there. His enlarged handsome face was right in front of her. Qin Mu blinked and said softly, "When did you come back?" "About 1 o'clock. Like her, he rested his head on the pillow. "We made love. Don't you remember?" Hearing his words, Qin Mu blushed. She looked at him and said, "Don't provoke me if you come back late in the future. I provoked you 3 times. He leaned over and gently rubbed her with the tip of his cold nose. It was very intimate. Qin Mu's eyes widened slightly. "You're shameless." She vaguely remembered that it was only once. "Then I did it myself." She took a step back, and he pressed forward. He had to tease her. "Looking at your little face makes me interested." Qin Mu bit her lips. She couldn't keep up with his pace. Zhou Chongguang smiled and didn't make things difficult for her anymore. Instead, he reached out and pinched her little face. Then he chuckled. "I'll make medicine for you." Chapter 2467. She remembered that he didn't take any protection last night. She was a little worried. Zhou Chongguang patted her little hand. "You still don't trust Qin Chen." "Qin Chen is a girl," Qin Mu said discontentedly. Zhou Chongguang laughed and rubbed her hair. "But he doesn't think of himself as a woman. He's more handsome than most men." Qin Mu sat on the bed, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She scratched her hair. "I'll sleep a little longer. I'll ignore you next time you're late. Got it?" His voice was unbelievably gentle. He changed his clothes and went downstairs. Qin Mu was too tired and fell asleep again. When she woke up, she was already in his arms. He fed her the plums, and then the medicine, all with the utmost tenderness. After drinking the medicine, she obediently lay in his arms and even showed some concern for President Zhou. "Do you want to take a break this morning?" Zhou Chongguang pursed his lips and smiled. "No need." Qin Mu glanced at him. Her gaze was a little meaningful. "I'm only 28, Mrs. Zhou." He pinched her little face. "I still have this little energy." Qin Mu covered her head with the quilt and refused to speak again. And Zhou Chongguang's expression was a little stunned. Just like that, the days passed. Qin Mu was also a little busy. The gallery had begun to be renovated. Just like her mother thought, she couldn't count on Cher. Her brother was very strict. Xiao Yishu was directly left to her grandmother, and her brother took his new wife to work every day. And her brother didn't feel ashamed. Instead, he felt very happy. Qin sometimes hugged Zhou Chongwang and said that if she didn't do the gallery, she would also go to work with him every day. The next day, Zhou Chongwang really wanted to dig her out. Qin smiled and hugged the quilt, saying that she didn't want to. She didn't want to go out early and come back late. It was so tiring. So you lied to me. You little liar. Zhou Chongwang carried her in his arms and looked at his watch. There's still half an hour left. Qin pretended to scream, "What do you want to do? Let's make love." He spat out these two words very seductively. Then, he pulled off the quilt and threw himself at her, his blood boiling. Qin struggled with all her might. Her pajamas slid open, revealing her soft and fragrant body. He hadn't touched her for a few days, so half an hour might not be enough. He would probably be late. Just as he was about to lose control of himself, Zhou Chongwang's phone rang. One sound, two sounds. He was still pressing down on Qin, unwilling to stop, unable to. How could a man stop at such a time? If he did, he wouldn't be a man. Qin was a little dazed at first, but she was also ruined by the ringtone. After a while, she came back to her senses and reached out to grab his phone. Zhou Chongwang pressed her with one hand and took the phone with the other. He saw that it was Xiao Zi, so he picked it up. "I'll go to the company in an hour." As he said that, he threw the phone on the ground far away. Qin voice was intermittent. "You won't have subordinates if you do this. I only need you," he whispered in her ear as he was feeling warm. Qin couldn't do anything to him, and he spent a lot of time igniting her body again. After that, Qin had no strength to lie down, but Zhou Chongwang still boiled medicine for her and made breakfast for her before going to the company. Chapter 2468. At first, Qin was a little dissatisfied, but after a long time, she got used to it. She went to bed early and read for a while before going to bed. Later, she slowly added some books on childcare to the bedside. That night, Zhou Chongwang looked at the book and stared at it for a long time. Then, he hugged her. He didn't do anything. He just hugged her and told her that they would definitely have children. Qin pursed her lips and felt that he was a little strange. She poked him with her little hand and said, "Zhou Chongwang." He nodded calmly. "You seem to like children even more than I do," she whispered. He nodded again and said, "I like children that you give birth to." He wanted her to give birth to a little Qin. From an early age, he wanted to dote on this child and make up for what he owed Qin. He wanted to live a good life with her. The absurdities of the past would not happen again. Because he loved her so much now, and he would always love her in the future. Qin nodded and said in a low voice, "What if I can't give birth? Then I'll like you." He kissed her forehead and said in a particularly hoarse voice, "We agreed that it won't change, okay?" She felt a little more at ease and talked to him about her gallery. Although Zhou Chongwang was busy, he still listened to his wife's words carefully. She looked so happy that he could tell that Qin was really happy now. Zhou Chongwang thought that it was fine as long as she was happy. When he went to work, Qin couldn't help but be childish again. In order to keep him, she even took the initiative to make him stay. Zhou Chongwang's soul was gone. He had a good time with her before leaving. Qin slept at home alone until noon. After eating, she drove to see the progress of the gallery in the afternoon. The designer was introduced by Zhou Chongwang. After looking at the drawings, Qin was also very satisfied. She didn't need to worry about anything. After she was done, she went to the shopping center to buy some supplements. She wanted to visit Cher on the way, as she hadn't seen her for half a month. She wanted to take a look at her treasured paintings. Qin put the things in the trunk and was about to open the door when she felt a pain in her lower abdomen. She was in so much pain that she bent over and felt like she was on fire. At this moment, she didn't even have the strength to open the car door, let alone drive. His fingers trembled as he picked up his phone and dialed Zhou Chongwang's number. But his cell phone was switched off. Then, she called his secretary. The secretary answered the phone and said that Zhou Zong was in a meeting and would ask Zhou Zong to call Mrs. Zhou back. Qin fingers clung to the car door and her forehead was covered with cold sweat. Call Zhou Chongwang to come to the phone. The secretary was so scared that she wet her pants. After a long time, she told the truth. Zhou Zong is not in the company. So, did Zhou Chongwang ask you to say that? Qin sneered and smashed the phone. Switched off his phone and lied to her that he was in the company. Where was he? Why was he so busy these days? Qin couldn't help but think about it. At this moment, she realized how difficult it was to maintain a so-called perfect marriage with a man with a criminal record. She had trusted him completely before. When he came back so late, she never thought about anything else. But this phone call, Qin knew that there was definitely something wrong. If there was nothing wrong, he wouldn't switch off his phone, and he wouldn't let the secretary say that he was in a meeting. Qin stomach was very painful, but she still forced herself to take a taxi. To Glory. Chapter 2469. The chauffeur drove for 2 minutes and they arrived at Glory. Glory was very different from before. Zhou Chongwang had used 8 years to turn a traditional family business into a tech upstart in B City. The 2 Gemini towers were both 68 stories tall and shone with a cold and noble glow under the sunlight. Qin stood at the bottom of the tower, feeling dizzy. The receptionist recognized her, mainly because Qin had caused a ruckus the last time. Moreover, she had recently heard that Zhou Zong and Madame's relationship was very good, so a divorce was impossible. Thus, she did not dare to be negligent this time and immediately went forward with a smile. "Madam, are you looking for Zhou Zong?" Just as she finished speaking, she was shocked because Qin expression was too ugly. Qin pushed the receptionist away. "I'll go up myself." The receptionist was shocked. She wanted to help her up but did not dare, so she immediately made a phone call to inform the secretary on the top floor. The phone was smashed by Qin. After smashing it, Qin said coldly, "If you dare to move again, I'll try it." As she did all this, she felt an indescribable pain in her lower abdomen. She did not know how she persevered, but she walked into the elevator like a shrew and rushed to the top floor. Qin heart was in a mess. She even thought about what she would do if she went up at that moment and found out that there was a woman in Zhou Chongwang's office. Would she turn around and leave, or would she scratch his face on the spot? She thought that she might do that. However, when she pushed open the door to the office, it was empty inside. Not to mention the scent of a woman, there was not even the scent of a person. Right in front of her was a set of sofas. It was no longer the original set. These days, he had changed everything in the office. He had done what he said. But why did he lie to her? Qin stood there in a daze. Behind her stood Zhou Chongwang's little secretary, who said carefully, "Zhou Zong is not in the office. He might have something urgent." She paused for a moment. "Vice President Zhao is here." Qin suddenly turned around and looked at Zhao Zi, Zhou Chongwang's good friend. Zhao Zi's expression was also not very good. His eyes were locked on Qin face as he called out to her, "Qin, are you not feeling well?" Qin took a step back to avoid his kindness. Her voice was even colder. Where is Zhou Chongguang? I went out to discuss business, Zhao Zi replied without thinking. His expression was natural. Qin Mu was unmoved. Why did his secretary say he was in a meeting? That's for dealing with other women. The little secretary is used to it and hasn't come back to her senses yet. After all, Chongguang wouldn't take the initiative to mention his private life to his secretary, Zhao Zi replied flawlessly. Qin Mu was speechless. The little secretary nodded furiously. Yes, that's right. That's right. At this moment, Zhao Zi went up to support Qin Mu. I'll send you to the hospital. Qin Mu, don't be willful. Chongguang will be worried. Qin Mu reached out to push him away. But she was too weak and couldn't push him away. She turned and looked at Zhao Zi. Where is he? Her woman's intuition told her that Zhao Zi was helping Zhou Chongguang hide something. Zhao Zi smiled. He's discussing a collaboration. It's not convenient for women to go. Qin Mu, Chongguang would at most hug you at such a place. He definitely won't do anything else. When he said that, Qin Mu naturally had nothing to say. Besides, she was in so much pain that she couldn't even stand. Chapter 2470. Zhao Zi nodded and carried Qin Mu in his arms. Qin Mu struggled for a while before losing her strength. Her face was pale. The elevator soon arrived at the lobby on the first floor. The secretary held the door for them but didn't follow them. There were many people in the lobby. They watched President Zhao carry Zhou Zong's wife out of the elevator. They were all silent. New gossip quietly spread within Glory Group. Everyone was guessing whether Mrs. Zhou came today for Zhou Zong War. President Zhao. Zhao Zi sat in the car and turned to look at Qin Mu, who was lying in the back seat. He whispered, "Hold on a little longer. I'll go to the nearest hospital." As he spoke, he started the car. The rearview mirror reflected his tense handsome face, and his fingers that were gripping the steering wheel were pale. He had told Zhou Chongguang before that Qin Mu was the one he liked. Although this was a little provocative to Zhou Chongguang, it was also the truth. Seeing Qin Mu like this, he felt sorry for her. When waiting at the red light, Zhao Zi called Zhou Chongguang, but his phone was still turned off. He cursed, hung up the phone, and focused on driving. 10 minutes later, they arrived at city's First People's Hospital's emergency room. Qin Mu was in so much pain that she couldn't walk. He could only carry her. Anyone who saw them would think that they were husband and wife. Hold on a little longer. Zhao Zi quickly walked over. His voice was a little low. I used my connections. I can see it immediately. Qin Mu nodded. At this moment, she was still grateful to Zhao Zi because she couldn't stand it anymore. Zhao Zi took the elevator directly to the emergency room on the 4th floor. After getting off the elevator, he quickly walked to the consultation room. Unexpectedly, his footsteps gradually slowed down, and he even turned around to leave. But Qin Mu had already seen it. She saw Zhou Chongguang. She saw Gu Mei, who was 4 or 5 months pregnant. Of course, there was also Mrs. Zhou. They were like a warm family. She stared at Zhou Chongguang, and Zhou Chongguang stared back at her. The surroundings suddenly quietened down. Only he, her, Gu Mei, and Gu Mei's stomach were left. She stared for a long time until her eyes were sore. Then, she blinked her teary eyes and asked Zhao Zi softly, "You said that he was discussing a contract with someone and that there might be a young lady sitting beside him. It wouldn't be convenient for me to go. But Zhao Zi, why didn't you tell me that he and Gu Mei had a child? 4 or 5 months. That was when they wanted to divorce. Was it before or after? Qin tried hard to blink away the tears in her eyes, but the more she blinked, the more she couldn't control. She buried her face in Zhao Zi's shoulder and whispered, "Take me away." However, Zhao Zi could not make the decision on this matter. He liked her, but she was now Chongguang's wife, and Chongguang had no love for Gu Mei. Chongguang was just temporarily passive. He didn't move. Qin Mu's hand hammered on his shoulder and slapped him. "I'm telling you to leave." It was the first time that a proud person like her had lost her composure in public. It was the first time that she did not care about her pride. It was because the blow was too great. Everything in front of her was beyond what she could bear. And that slap on Zhao Zi's face was more like a slap on Zhou Chongguang's face. Zhou Chongguang walked over quickly and said in a low voice, "Mumu, what's wrong?" However, Qin Mu had already fainted. Perhaps she was avoiding him, or perhaps she did not want to see him. Her hand fell limply and she buried her face in Zhao Zi's shoulder. It was as if everything had nothing to do with Zhou Chongguang. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.